The blood on her hands wasn't hers, but Cora Daniels knew that wouldn't matter to the men hunting her through the Colorado mountains. As the first winter storm of 1876 descended like a white curtain between earth and sky, she stumbled through knee-deep snow, her borrowed coat doing little against the biting wind that swept down from the peaks above Independence, a small mining town she'd passed through hours ago. Her fingers had gone numb, her face felt like it had been scraped raw, and every breath burned her lungs. The horse she'd taken from the stable had thrown her a mile back when lightning split the darkening sky, and now she was alone, on foot, with night falling fast and those men somewhere behind her. Cora had been traveling with a medicine show, working as an assistant to Dr. Holloway, a charlatan who sold colored water as miracle cures to desperate people. She'd needed the work, needed to eat, needed to get away from St. Louis and the memories that haunted her there. But 3 days ago, everything had changed when the show rolled into a small settlement east of here. Dr. Holloway had sold a bottle of his cure to a young mother whose baby was sick with fever. The baby died that night. The father, mad with grief, had come to their camp with a gun. There had been shouting, a struggle, and then a shot. Dr. Holloway lay dead, and Cora had blood on her hands from trying to stop the bleeding. But when the father's brothers arrived, they saw only a dead man and a woman standing over him with red-stained fingers. She ran. What else could she do? There would be no fair trial for a woman with no family, no money, no proof of her innocence. She'd seen how frontier justice worked, swift and brutal and often wrong. The snow fell harder now, thick flakes that clung to her eyelashes and made it impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. Her legs shook with exhaustion, each step an act of will. She knew she couldn't keep going much longer. The cold was winning. She could feel it in her bones, a creeping numbness that promised sleep, promised rest, promised an end to running. Then, through the swirling white, she saw it. A light. Faint, golden, barely visible through the storm, but unmistakably there. A cabin, small and sturdy, tucked against the base of a rocky outcrop that provided some shelter from the wind. Smoke rose from its chimney, whipped away almost instantly by the gale. Cora didn't think. She just moved toward it, using the last of her strength to push through the drifts. She half fell against the wooden door, her frozen hands barely able to make a fist to knock. The sound was weak, pathetic, but she tried again, pounding with the side of her hand. The door opened so suddenly, she almost fell inside. Strong hands caught her, and she found herself looking up into a face that was all hard angles and sun-weathered skin, framed by dark hair that fell past his collar. His eyes were gray, the color of storm clouds, and they widened in surprise at the sight of her. "Please," Cora managed through chattering teeth. "Please help me." The man didn't hesitate. He pulled her inside out of the wind and snow and kicked the door shut behind her. The sudden warmth of the cabin was almost painful after the bitter cold outside. A fire crackled in a stone fireplace, and the single room was simply furnished but clean, with a bed in one corner, a table and chairs, shelves lined with supplies, and hooks on the wall holding various tools and equipment. "You're half frozen," the man said, his voice deep and rough from lack of use. "Can you walk to the fire?" Cora nodded, but when she tried to move, her legs buckled. He caught her again, this time scooping her up as though she weighed nothing and carrying her to a chair near the fireplace. He moved with practiced efficiency, wrapping a thick blanket around her shoulders, then going to the stove where a kettle sat. He poured something hot into a tin cup and pressed it into her hands. "Drink," he ordered, slowly. It was coffee, strong and bitter, and the best thing Cora had ever tasted. The heat of it spread through her chest, and she wrapped both hands around the cup, soaking in its warmth. She could feel the man watching her, assessing, and when she finally looked up at him, she saw concern in those gray eyes but also caution. "Thank you," she whispered. "I thought I was going to die out there." "You would have," he said simply. "Storm's only getting worse." "What were you doing out there?" "Where's your horse?" "Through me," Cora said. "About a mile back. I tried to keep going, but on foot in this storm you wouldn't have lasted another hour." He studied her face, taking in the details. "You running from something," she stiffened, and he noticed. Of course he did. He seemed like the kind of man who noticed everything. "Or someone," he added quietly. Cora looked down at the cup in her hands. She was tired of running, tired of lying, tired of being afraid. And something about this man, this stranger who had pulled her from certain death without hesitation, made her want to tell the truth. "Men are looking for me," she said. "They think I killed someone. I didn't, but they won't believe me. They'll hang me if they catch me." The silence stretched long enough that she forced herself to look at him. His expression hadn't changed, hadn't hardened with judgment or suspicion. "Did you kill someone?" he asked. "No, but I can't prove it." He nodded slowly, as if this made perfect sense to him. "Well, nobody's going anywhere in this storm. Not you, not anyone chasing you. We're snowed in for at least a day, maybe two. You're safe here." "Why would you help me? You don't know me. I could be lying." A ghost of something that might have been a smile touched his lips. "Could be. But I don't think you are. I've seen enough liars to know one when I see one, and you're just scared. That's different." He moved away then, going to the shelves and pulling down a tin of something. "Name's Lucas Nash," he said over his shoulder. "This is my line cabin. I work for the Triple Creek Ranch, checking the fence lines and watching for cattle that wander up this high. Usually don't get visitors, especially not in the middle of a snowstorm." "Cora Daniels," she offered. "And I'm sorry for bringing trouble to your door." "Haven't brought it yet," Lucas said. He was preparing something at the stove, and the smell of bacon began to fill the cabin. "And like I said, nobody's going anywhere tonight. Storm's a beast." Cora could hear it now, the wind howling around the cabin, rattling the shutters. Snow hissed against the windows, and somewhere outside, something banged rhythmically, a loose board or gate caught by the gale. It was the kind of storm that killed people, and she'd been out in it, running blind with no real hope of survival, if she hadn't seen his light. She shuddered, and Lucas glanced at her. "You hurt anywhere, besides the cold?" "No, just tired and scared." "Scared I can't fix," he said. "But tired and hungry, those I can help with." He moved around the cabin with an economy of motion that spoke of years of living alone, years of taking care of himself in this isolated place. He cooked bacon and beans, fried some bread in the bacon grease, and served it all on tin plates that he set on the small table. Cora wanted to help, but when she tried to stand, he waved her back to her chair. "Eat," he said. "Warm up. Then we'll figure out the rest." The food was simple but good, and Cora hadn't realized how hungry she was until she started eating. She couldn't remember her last real meal. The medicine show had been struggling, and Dr. Holloway had spent what little money they had on whiskey rather than provisions. She'd been living on hardtack and hope for weeks. Lucas ate in silence, watching the storm through the window. The light was fading fast now, the short winter day giving way to night. He rose when he finished and lit a lantern, then checked the fire and added more wood. The cabin was warm, cozy even, a small pocket of safety in a world that seemed determined to kill her. "You can have the bed," Lucas said. "I'll take the floor." "I can't take your bed," Cora protested. "You've already done so much. Bed's big enough for you, and I've slept on worse than a floor with a good fire. Argument's over." His tone was firm but not unkind. "You need rest, real rest. You're dead on your feet." He was right, of course. Now that she was warm and fed, exhaustion was hitting her like a physical weight. She could barely keep her eyes open. but guilt nagged at her. This man owed her nothing, yet he'd given her everything: shelter, food, safety, and he was giving her his bed while he slept on the floor. "Why are you being so kind to me?" she asked. Lucas was quiet for a moment, staring into the fire. "Found a man once out in a storm like this. I was younger, maybe 19, working my first winter on the range. I saw him, but I was scared. Didn't know if he was dangerous, didn't know if stopping would put me at risk. So I rode past." He paused, his jaw tightening. "Found him the next day, frozen to death about 100 yards from a line shack. He'd been so close. If I'd helped him, he'd have lived." "That wasn't your fault," Cora said softly. "Maybe not. But I decided that day that I wouldn't make that choice again. Someone needs help, I help them. Simple as that." Cora felt something shift in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. This man, this stranger, had more honor in his little finger than most men she'd known had in their whole bodies. He was hard, rough around the edges, probably dangerous in his own way, but there was a fundamental decency in him that shone through. "Thank you, Lucas," she said. "You saved my life tonight." He shrugged, uncomfortable with the gratitude. "Go on, get some sleep. Morning will come soon enough." Cora made her way to the bed, which was covered with thick quilts and blankets. She lay down fully clothed, too tired even to consider removing her boots. The bed smelled like leather and wood smoke and something else, something masculine and not unpleasant. Within minutes, despite her fear, despite everything, she fell into the deepest sleep she'd had in weeks. She woke sometime in the night to the sound of the wind still howling and the fire crackling. By its light, she could see Lucas stretched out on the floor near the hearth, his head pillowed on his saddle, covered by a single blanket. He slept on his side, one hand near the gun belt he'd laid within easy reach. Even in sleep, he was alert, ready. Cora watched him for a moment, this man who'd saved her without question, and felt her throat tighten with emotion. She'd been alone for so long, trusting no one, depending on no one. And here was someone who asked nothing of her but offered everything he had. She slept again, and this time there were no nightmares. Morning came gray and cold. The storm had passed in the night, leaving behind a world transformed. Snow lay thick on everything, pristine and white, sculpted into fantastic shapes by the wind. The sky was a pale, washed-out blue, and the sun, when it appeared over the peaks, was blinding in its reflection off the snow. Lucas was already up, had been for some time by the look of things. Fresh coffee sat on the stove, and he was outside. She could see him through the window, checking on something. She rose, feeling sore and stiff but infinitely better than the night before. She poured herself coffee and stood by the window, watching him. He was tall, she noted, with broad shoulders and a lean build. He moved with confidence through the deep snow, checking what looked like a small shed attached to the cabin. When he came back inside, bringing a blast of cold air with him, his cheeks were red from the wind. "Morning," he said. "How do you feel?" "Like I didn't die, which is better than I expected." She managed a small smile. "Thank you again." He nodded, closing the door firmly behind him. "Storm's past, but the snow's deep. Nobody's going to be moving fast out there. If those men are tracking you, they'll have lost your trail in the storm. So I'm safe." Hope rose in her chest. "For now. But Cora, I need you to tell me the whole story, everything that happened. Because if there are men coming, I need to know what we're facing." So she told him. She told him about the medicine show, about Dr. Holloway and his fake cures, about the baby that died and the father who came with a gun. She told him about the blood on her hands, about running, about the 3 brothers who were hunting her, men named Garrett who had a reputation for violence and a complete disregard for the law. Lucas listened without interrupting, his face impassive but his eyes sharp. taking in every detail. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. "The Garrett brothers," he finally said. "I know of them. Mean sons of guns, all three. They won't give up easy and they won't care much about your side of the story." "I know," Cora said miserably. "That's why I ran. What else could I do?" "You did right," Lucas said firmly. "But running won't solve this. Eventually they'll catch up or you'll run out of places to go. You need to clear your name." "How? There's no proof. It's just my word against theirs." "Maybe, but maybe not." He paced the small cabin, thinking. "You said there was a struggle, that the father came with a gun. Did anyone else see what happened?" "The show's performers were there, but they scattered when the shooting started. I don't know where they went." "So there are witnesses." "People who could testify that the father came armed, that it was an accident." Lucas stopped pacing and looked at her. "There's a marshal in Independence, Tom Cassidy. He's a fair man, about as honest as they come in these parts. If we could get to him, tell him your story, maybe find those witnesses." "The Garretts won't wait for a trial," Cora interrupted. "They'll kill me the moment they find me." "Not if you're under the marshal's protection, and not if you have someone standing with you." His gray eyes met hers, steady and sure. "I'll help you, Cora. We'll go to Independence, talk to Marshal Cassidy, and we'll sort this out proper." "Why?" the question burst from her. "Why would you do this? You don't know me. This isn't your fight." Lucas was quiet for a moment, then he said, "Maybe it wasn't my fight when you knocked on my door, but you spent the night under my roof, ate at my table, and I gave you my word you were safe here. That makes it my fight now. I don't go back on my word." Cora felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them away furiously. She'd cried enough these past days, cried until she had no tears left, or so she thought. But this man's simple honor, his willingness to stand beside her against dangers that weren't his own, touched something deep inside her that had been cold and hardened by years of disappointment. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me yet," Lucas said with a faint smile. "We've got a hard ride ahead of us, and no guarantee this will work. But it's better than running blind." They spent the rest of the day preparing. The snow was too deep to travel immediately, and Lucas's horse, a sturdy bay gelding named Red, would need a day to rest before making the trip to Independence. Lucas used the time to check his supplies, clean his guns, and explain to Cora what they'd face on the journey. "It's about 15 miles to Independence," he said, pointing to a rough map he'd drawn on a piece of paper. "In good weather, that's a 5-hour ride. With this snow, it'll take us twice that, maybe more. We'll need to leave at first light to make sure we're in town before dark." "Will the Garretts be there?" Cora asked. "Maybe. Independence is the biggest town in this area, so if they're looking for you, they'll check there eventually. But it's also where the marshal is and where we can get help. It's a risk, but it's the best option we have." As they talked, Cora learned more about Lucas. He was 27, had been working cattle since he was 14, when his father died and left him and his mother with nothing but debts. He'd worked hard, saved his money, and now he was the head wrangler at the Triple Creek Ranch, a position of respect and responsibility. He was quiet by nature, preferred animals to people, and had never married. "Come close a few times," he admitted when she asked. "But ranch life is hard, and not many women want to spend their lives in isolation, dealing with the cold and the danger and the loneliness." "It doesn't seem to bother you," Cora observed. "I like the quiet, like the solitude. Or I did." He glanced at her, and something in his expression made her heart skip. "Turns out it's not so bad having company." Cora felt her cheeks warm and she looked away, focusing on the coffee in her cup. She was acutely aware of him in the small space of the cabin, aware of his every movement, every glance. It was strange and unsettling and not entirely unwelcome. She'd known him less than a day, but she felt safer with him than she had in years. That night, he insisted again that she take the bed, and again he slept on the floor by the fire. But before they settled down to sleep, Cora said, "Lucas, when this is over, when my name is cleared, I'll owe you. I'll owe you my life." He looked at her across the flickering firelight, his face half in shadow. "You don't owe me anything, Cora. But I do. You've given me everything when I had nothing. You've risked yourself for a stranger. If there's ever anything I can do to repay you, there is one thing," he said slowly, and her heart began to pound. "Anything. Just be mine," he said simply. "When this is over, when you're free and clear, don't run off to wherever you were headed. Stay here with me." The words hung in the air between them, and Cora couldn't breathe. She stared at him, at this man she barely knew but who had shown her more kindness than anyone in her life, and she saw in his eyes that he meant it. He wasn't joking, wasn't making light. He was serious. "You don't know me," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I know enough. I know you're brave and honest. I know you kept going when most people would have given up. I know you're the first person in years to make this cabin feel like something more than just a place to sleep." He took a step toward her. "I'm not saying I have all the answers, Cora. I'm not saying it'll be easy, but I am saying I want to try, if you'll have me." Cora's mind was reeling. This was insane. They'd known each other for barely a day. But at the same time, it felt right in a way nothing had felt right in a very long time. She'd been drifting for years, moving from place to place with no roots, no home, no one who cared if she lived or died. And here was a man offering her all of that, asking for nothing but her presence in return. "I don't have anything to offer you," she said. "No money, no property, nothing but myself. That's all I want. But you could have anyone. Any woman would be lucky. I don't want anyone," Lucas said, and now he was close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. "I want you. From the moment you fell against my door, half frozen and scared but still fighting, I knew you were something special." "This is crazy," Cora breathed. "Maybe. But most of the best things in life are a little crazy." His hand came up gentle and touched her cheek. "I'm not asking you to decide right now. First, we clear your name, we make sure you're safe. But after that, when the dust settles, think about it. Think about staying. Think about what we could build together." Cora couldn't speak. She could only nod, her eyes locked with his. And then, slowly, carefully, as if afraid she might bolt, Lucas leaned down and kissed her. It was soft, gentle, a question more than a demand. And Cora, who had spent so long alone and afraid, answered by kissing him back. When they broke apart, both of them were breathing hard, and Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "Get some sleep," he murmured. "Tomorrow's going to be a long day." Cora nodded, not trusting her voice. She went to the bed and lay down, her lips still tingling from the kiss, her heart pounding in her chest. Across the cabin, Lucas settled onto the floor, but she could feel him watching her, could feel the connection between them like a physical thing. She'd come to his door seeking shelter from a storm. She'd found so much more. They left at dawn, riding double on Red because Lucas's horse was the only one available. The cold was bitter, the kind that made every breath hurt, but the sky was clear and the sun was bright. The world was silent and white, beautiful in its frozen stillness. Cora sat behind Lucas, her arms wrapped around his waist, holding tight as the horse picked its way carefully through the deep snow. She could feel the muscles of his back against her cheek, feel the steady rhythm of his breathing, and it made her feel safe in a way she couldn't quite explain. They rode in silence for the first hour, both of them scanning the landscape for any sign of danger. The snow was deep enough that Red had to work hard, lunging through drifts, and Lucas murmured encouragement to him, keeping him steady and calm. "How much farther?" Cora asked when they stopped to rest the horse and let him drink from a stream that ran clear and cold through the snow. Maybe another 6 hours. We're making good time considering. Lucas looked at her, his eyes concerned. How are you holding up? I'm fine, cold but fine. Tell me if it gets to be too much. We can stop, build a fire. No, I want to get to Independence. The sooner we talk to the marshal, the sooner this is over. Lucas nodded, but she could see the worry in his expression. He was afraid, she realized. Not for himself, but for her. Afraid that something would happen to her, that he wouldn't be able to protect her. It made her want to hold him tighter, to tell him it would be all right. But she didn't know if that was true. They rode on, and the day wore on, the sun tracking across the sky. They passed through forests of pine and aspen, their branches heavy with snow. They crossed frozen streams and climbed ridges that gave them views of the mountains stretching away in all directions, vast and lonely and magnificent. It was late afternoon when they finally saw Independence spread out in the valley below. It was a small town, maybe 100 buildings clustered around a main street, with smoke rising from chimneys and the distant sound of voices and activity. To Cora, who had been running and hiding for days, it looked like civilization, like safety. But it could also be danger. The Garretts might be there waiting for her. We'll go straight to the marshal's office, Lucas said, as if reading her thoughts. Stay close to me, and if anything happens, you run. Understand? I'm not leaving you to face them alone. Cora, no, she said firmly. You said this was your fight too. That means we face it together. He turned in the saddle to look at her, and despite the seriousness of the situation, he smiled. You're stubborn. So I've been told. I like it. They rode down into Independence as the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The town was busy with people finishing their day's work, heading home or into saloons and stores. A few glanced at them as they passed, curious but not hostile. The marshal's office was a sturdy building near the center of town, with a sign hanging over the door and a window that glowed with lamplight. Lucas dismounted and helped Cora down, then tied Red to the hitching post. He checked his gun, making sure it was loose in its holster, then looked at her. Ready? Ready. They went inside together. The office was warm and smelled of coffee and wood polish. Behind a desk sat a man in his 50s with gray hair and a weathered face that bore the lines of a life spent upholding the law in a hard land. He looked up when they entered, his eyes taking them in with a lawman's practiced assessment. Help you? He asked. Marshal Cassidy, Lucas said. I'm Lucas Nash from the Triple Creek Ranch. This is Cora Daniels. She needs your help. The marshal's eyes sharpened. Daniels, I've heard that name. There are men looking for a woman by that name, say she killed a man. I didn't, Cora said quickly. It was an accident, and I can prove it if you'll listen to my story. Marshal Cassidy leaned back in his chair, studying her. Then he gestured to 2 chairs in front of his desk. Sit down, talk. I'm listening. So for the second time, Cora told her story. But this time, Lucas was beside her, adding details, supporting her, making it clear that he believed her. The marshal listened without interrupting, his face impassive, but his eyes were shrewd, missing nothing. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, the Garrett brothers. They've been in town for 2 days asking about you. They're mean, Miss Daniels, and they're determined. They're not going to just let this go. I know, Cora said, but I can't keep running. I need this to be over. You said there were witnesses, people from the medicine show who saw what happened. Yes, but I don't know where they went after the shooting. I do, the marshal said, or at least I know where some of them went. A group matching that description came through here about a week ago, heading west toward Denver. They were asking about work, about where they could set up. I told them Denver might be a better bet than Independence. So they're gone, Cora said, her heart sinking. Maybe. But Denver's not that far. I could send a telegram, have the marshal there track them down. If they're willing to testify to what they saw, that would go a long way to clearing your name. How long would that take? Lucas asked. Few days, maybe a week. Depends on how easy they are to find. The marshal looked at Cora. In the meantime, you'd be safer here under my protection. I've got a jail cell that's empty. You could stay there. A jail cell? Cora's voice rose in alarm. It's for your protection, not punishment, the marshal said gently. The Garretts can't get to you if you're in my jail, and I can keep an eye on you, make sure nothing happens while we sort this out. She'll stay with me, Lucas said flatly. The marshal raised an eyebrow. You sure about that, Nash? If the Garretts find out you're helping her, they'll come after you too. Let them. Lucas, no, Cora said. I won't let you put yourself in more danger because of me. Too late. I'm already in. He looked at the marshal. I've got a room at the boarding house. She'll stay there with me, and I'll keep her safe until your telegram comes back. Marshal Cassidy studied them both, then shrugged. Your funeral. But I'm warning you, the Garretts aren't men to take lightly. They've killed before, and they'll do it again without a second thought. I can handle myself. I don't doubt it, but 3 against 1 isn't good odds. Then I better make sure they don't catch me off guard. Lucas stood, and Cora followed. We'll be at Mrs. Henderson's boarding house if you need us. I'll send the telegram tonight, the marshal said. And Nash. Watch your back. Outside, the sun had set fully, and the street was lit by lanterns and the glow of windows. Lucas led Cora down the street to a large, well-kept house with a sign that read, Henderson's Boarding House, in neat letters. A woman answered their knock, plump and cheerful, with gray hair pulled back in a bun. Lucas Nash, she exclaimed. Haven't seen you in a month of Sundays. What brings you to town? Business, Mrs. Henderson, and I need a room. 2 rooms, actually, Mrs. Henderson's eyes went to Cora, curious and not unkind. This your wife? No, madam, but she's under my protection. She needs a safe place to stay for a few days. Well, any friend of yours is welcome here. Come in, come in. I've got 2 rooms on the 2nd floor right next to each other. Will that do? That'll do fine. They followed Mrs. Henderson inside, and she showed them up a narrow staircase to 2 small but clean rooms with comfortable beds and washstands. She promised to bring them dinner and left them alone in the hallway. You should try to rest, Lucas said. It's been a long day. What about you? I'll be right next door. If you need anything at all, just knock. Cora nodded, but she didn't move. She stood there in the dim hallway, looking at him, this man who had turned her world upside down in the space of 2 days. Lucas, what you said last night about me staying with you, did you mean it? Every word. Even if this doesn't work out, even if they find me guilty and I have to run again, then I'll run with you. He reached out and took her hand, his fingers warm and strong around hers. I meant what I said, Cora. I want you to be mine. Not because you owe me, not out of obligation, but because I think we could have something good together, something real. I barely know you. Then let's change that. We've got time now, we can talk, get to know each other properly. And then, when this is all over, you can decide. But I'm not going anywhere, Cora. I'll be right here, standing beside you, no matter what happens. Cora felt her eyes fill with tears. She'd been alone for so long, fighting for survival, trusting no one. And now this man was offering her everything she'd ever wanted and been too afraid to hope for. I think I could love you, she whispered. I think maybe I already do. Lucas's smile was like sunrise, bright and warm and full of promise. He pulled her close, and this time when he kissed her, it wasn't gentle or questioning. It was fierce and certain, a claim and a promise all at once. Cora kissed him back with everything she had, pouring all her fear and hope and longing into it. When they broke apart, both of them were shaking. Lucas rested his forehead against hers, his breathing ragged. "Get some rest," he murmured. "We'll figure this out, together." Cora nodded and reluctantly pulled away, going into her room and closing the door. She could hear him moving in the next room, the sound of his boots on the floor, and it comforted her. He was close. He was here. She wasn't alone. She lay down on the bed, still fully clothed, and closed her eyes. Sleep came quickly, and for the first time in weeks, she dreamed of something other than running. She dreamed of a cabin in the mountains, of a fire and warmth and strong arms holding her safe. The next 2 days passed in a strange mix of tension and peace. Cora and Lucas stayed close to the boarding house, venturing out only when necessary and always together. They talked for hours, learning about each other's pasts, their hopes and fears and dreams. Lucas told her about growing up on a small ranch in Texas, about his father's death and the hard years that followed. Cora told him about her childhood in St. Louis, about losing her parents to cholera when she was 16 and the years of struggle that came after. "I always wanted a home," she admitted. "A real home with roots and family. But it seemed like every time I got close, something would go wrong. I'd lose my job, or the place I was living would burn down, or the person I trusted would betray me. After a while, I stopped hoping. It seemed easier to just keep moving." "You don't have to keep moving anymore," Lucas said. They were sitting in the small parlor of the boarding house, a fire crackling in the fireplace. It was late and they were alone, Mrs. Henderson having gone to bed hours ago. "You can have a home, Cora." "With me? What if I'm not cut out for ranch life? What if I can't handle the isolation? You're one of the strongest people I've ever met. You survived a blizzard on foot, you faced men hunting you, and you're still here, still fighting. If you can do all that, you can handle anything." He reached out and took her hand. "But you don't have to decide right now. Just promise me you'll think about it." "I promise." On the 3rd day, the telegram came back from Denver. Marshal Cassidy sent word to the boarding house, asking them to come to his office. Cora's heart pounded as they walked through the town, Lucas close beside her. This was it. This would determine her future. The marshal was at his desk, the telegram in his hand. His expression was grave. "I heard back from Denver," he said without preamble. "They found your witnesses. 2 of them are willing to testify that the father came to your camp with a gun, that there was a struggle, and that the shooting was an accident. That's enough to clear you of murder charges." Relief flooded through Cora so strongly she thought her legs might give out. Lucas's hand was on her shoulder, steadying her. "That's good news," he said. "So she's free to go." "Not quite that simple," the marshal said. "The Garretts are still out there, and they don't care about testimony or the law. They want revenge, and they won't stop until they get it. I can protect Cora here in Independence, but the moment she leaves town, she's vulnerable." "Then what do we do?" Cora asked. "I can arrest the Garretts, bring them in on charges of harassment and threatening behavior. It won't stick for long, but it'll buy you time to get out of the territory, go somewhere they can't find you." "No," Lucas said firmly. "Running isn't the answer. There has to be another way." "There is," the marshal said slowly. "I could deputize you, Nash. Give you legal authority to defend Cora if the Garretts come after her. And I could make it clear to them, very clear, that she's under the law's protection and that any harm that comes to her will be met with the full force of the law." "Will that stop them?" Cora asked. "Maybe. Maybe not. But it's the best option we've got short of leaving the territory." Lucas looked at Cora. "It's your choice. We can run, go somewhere new and start over, or we can stay and face this." Cora thought about it. She thought about all the years she'd spent running, never settling, never putting down roots because she was afraid. And she thought about the cabin in the mountains, about the man beside her who'd offered her everything, and she knew what she wanted. I'm tired of running, she said. I want to stay. Then that's what we'll do. Lucas looked at the marshal. Deputize me, and let's go talk to the Garretts. The Garretts were staying at a run-down hotel on the edge of town. Marshal Cassidy, Lucas, and Cora walked there together in the late afternoon, the winter sun low on the horizon. Cora's heart was pounding, but Lucas's presence beside her kept her steady. He'd pinned the deputy's badge to his coat, and he walked with the confidence of a man who knew what he was doing. They found the Garretts in the hotel's saloon, 3 hard-faced men with cold eyes and gun belts slung low. The oldest, a man named Carl, looked up when they entered, and his eyes narrowed when he saw Cora. "Well, well," he said, rising slowly, "if it isn't the woman who killed our brother." "She didn't kill anyone," Marshal Cassidy said flatly. "I've got witnesses who say it was an accident, that your brother came with a gun and started the fight. Miss Daniels is innocent." "Don't care what your witnesses say," Carl said. "She's got blood on her hands and she's going to pay." "No, she's not," Lucas said, stepping forward. His hand rested lightly on his gun. "Miss Daniels is under the protection of the law. That means she's under my protection. You come after her, you answer to me." The other 2 Garretts, younger but just as mean-looking, stood up as well. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Other patrons of the saloon were backing away, sensing trouble. "You're making a mistake, Cowboy," Carl said softly. "This isn't your fight. I'm making it my fight, and I'm giving you a choice. You can accept that your brother made a mistake, that he paid for it with his life, and you can move on. Or you can push this, and I promise you, it won't end well for you." 3 against 1, Carl observed. "I like those odds." 3 against 2, Marshal Cassidy corrected, his hand on his own gun. "And I should mention that attacking a deputy in the performance of his duties carries a mandatory 10-year sentence. You really want to risk that for revenge?" The Garretts exchanged glances. Carl's jaw worked, and for a moment Cora thought he was going to draw, but then slowly he relaxed. "This isn't over," he said. "Yes, it is," Lucas said. "You've got until sunrise to leave Independence. If you're still here after that, I'll arrest you. And if I ever hear that you've come after Miss Daniels again, I'll hunt you down myself." "Clear?" Carl glared at him but nodded once sharply. "Clear." They left the saloon, and Cora let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "Do you think they'll really leave?" she asked. "They'll leave," Marshal Cassidy said. "Carl's mean, but he's not stupid. He knows when he's beaten." He looked at Lucas. "You handled that well. Ever think about becoming a lawman full-time?" "No, sir, I'm a rancher. That's all I want to be." They walked back to the boarding house, and this time, when they climbed the stairs to their rooms, Cora didn't go into hers alone. She followed Lucas into his, and when he turned to look at her, questioning, she said, "I don't want to be alone tonight." "Cora, I don't want you to feel like you have to. I don't feel like I have to do anything," she interrupted. "But I want to be with you. I want to fall asleep knowing you're right there. Is that all right? More than all right?" He pulled her close, and they stood there for a long moment, just holding each other. Then Lucas stepped back and began preparing the room, banking the fire, pulling the curtains. Cora removed her boots and coat and climbed into the bed, and Lucas joined her, lying on top of the covers with his arm around her. She rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, and felt safer than she'd ever felt in her life. "Lucas," she said softly, "about what you asked me, about being yours. You don't have to answer yet." "Yes," she said, lifting her head to look at him. "Yes, I'll be yours. I'll stay with you, build a home with you. I'll take that chance because I think what we could have together is worth any risk." His smile was brilliant, and he cupped her face in his hands, kissing her deeply. "I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret that choice," he murmured against her lips. "I know you will." They kissed again, and this time it was slower, deeper, full of promise and desire. But Lucas kept it gentle, respectful, and when they finally broke apart, he said, "When we get married, I want to do this right. A proper wedding with a preacher and witnesses. I want everyone to know you're my wife." "Married," Cora repeated, tasting the word. "I like the sound of that." "So do I." They lay together in the warm darkness, talking softly about the future. Lucas told her about the ranch, about the small house the owners had promised him once he saved enough money, about the land and the work and the life they could build. Cora talked about her dreams of a garden, of maybe having children someday, of finally having a place that was truly hers. "Ours," Lucas corrected. "It'll be ours." "Ours," she agreed, and the word felt like a prayer, a promise, a new beginning. The next morning, the Garretts were gone. Marshal Cassidy confirmed it, and the tension that had been hanging over the town lifted. Cora's name was officially cleared, the witness's testimony on record, and she was free to go wherever she wanted. She chose to stay. 2 weeks later, on a cold but clear December day, Cora Daniels became Cora Nash in a simple ceremony at the church in Independence. Mrs. Henderson cried. The ranch hands from the Triple Creek came to witness it, and Marshal Cassidy stood as Lucas's best man. Cora wore a simple dress that Mrs. Henderson had helped her sew, and Lucas wore his best shirt and a nervous smile. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Lucas kissed her like she was the most precious thing in the world, and Cora felt her heart overflow with happiness. This was what she'd been searching for all her life. This sense of belonging, of being loved and wanted and valued. She'd found it in the most unexpected place, with the most unexpected man, and she knew, deep in her soul, that this was meant to be. They spent their wedding night at the boarding house, and this time when they came together, it was as husband and wife, with all the passion and tenderness that implied. Lucas was gentle and patient, making sure Cora felt cherished and safe, and when they finally fell asleep in each other's arms, both of them were smiling. The next morning they rode out to the cabin where it had all begun. The snow had melted somewhat, and the world was beautiful in its winter quiet. Lucas had been given a few days off from his duties, and he wanted to show Cora the place that would be their home, at least for a while, until the ranch house was ready. The cabin looked different in daylight, smaller but somehow more welcoming. Lucas carried her over the threshold, laughing at her protests, and set her down in front of the fire he quickly built up. "Welcome home, Mrs. Nash," he said. "Home," Cora repeated, looking around. It was small and simple, but it was theirs. I liked the sound of that. They spent the next few days in the cabin, living as husband and wife, learning each other, building the foundation of their life together. Lucas taught her to ride his horse, taught her to shoot his rifle in case she ever needed to defend herself. Cora cooked for him, mended his clothes, and started planning the garden she'd plant in the spring. It was hard work, living in such an isolated place, but Cora found she loved it. She loved waking up next to Lucas, loved the quiet days and the peaceful nights. She loved watching him work, seeing the skill and care he put into everything he did. And she loved knowing that she was building something real, something lasting, with a man who loved her as much as she loved him. Winter gave way to spring and spring to summer. The ranch house Lucas had been promised was finished by July, a small but sturdy structure with 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a parlor. They moved in together, filling it with furniture Lucas built and curtains Cora sewed. It was their home, truly theirs, and every night when they closed the door against the world, Cora felt grateful beyond words for the storm that had brought her to Lucas's door. In October, Cora realized she was pregnant. She told Lucas one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, and his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing with joy, then set her down carefully as if she might break. "A baby," he kept saying. "We're going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Cora asked, though she could see the answer in his face. "Happy doesn't even begin to cover it. You've given me everything, Cora. A home, a family, a reason to wake up every morning. I never thought I'd have this. Neither did I. But we have it now, and we're going to hold on to it." Their son was born in June of 1877, a healthy, red-faced baby boy they named James Lucas Nash. Lucas was beside himself with pride and tenderness, holding his son with such care and wonder that Cora fell in love with him all over again. She watched him rock the baby to sleep, watched him walk the floor at night when James cried, watched him be the father she knew he would be, and her heart was full. Life on the ranch was hard, especially with a baby, but they made it work. Lucas's salary was supplemented by the garden Cora grew and the chickens she raised, and they slowly saved money, planning for the future. They talked about buying their own land someday, building their own ranch, but for now they were content with what they had. 2 years later, their daughter was born, a tiny, dark-haired girl they named Emma Rose. Lucas doted on her just as he did on James, and Cora often found him with both children, telling them stories or teaching them about the animals and the land. He was a devoted father, patient and kind, and seeing him with their children made Cora love him even more. The years passed in a blur of work and joy, and the everyday challenges of raising a family in a hard land. There were difficult times, winters that were too harsh, summers that were too dry, illnesses that scared them and injuries that tested them. But through it all, they had each other, and that was enough. By 1885, James was 8 and Emma was 6, and they were adding a third child to their family, another son they named Thomas after Lucas's father. The little house was crowded now, and Lucas began talking seriously about buying their own land, about building something that would belong to their family for generations. It took 3 more years of saving, of working from dawn to dusk and sometimes beyond. But in the spring of 1888, they bought a piece of land just outside Independence. It wasn't large, maybe 100 acres, but it was theirs, deeded and paid for. Lucas built a house there with his own hands, with help from neighbors and friends they'd made over the years. It was bigger than the ranch house, with 4 bedrooms and a wide porch that looked out over the mountains. They moved in on Cora's 35th birthday, and as she stood on that porch, looking at the land that stretched before her and the family that surrounded her, she thought about how far she'd come. She'd been a desperate woman running through a snowstorm, with nothing but fear and determination to keep her going. And now she was here, with a husband she loved beyond measure, 3 healthy children, and a home that was truly hers. "What are you thinking about?" Lucas asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "About that night," she said. "The night I knocked on your door. Best night of my life," he said, kissing her neck. "Well, second best. The best was when you married me. I would have died out there if you hadn't taken me in. But I did, and you stayed. You chose to stay with me, and you've made every day since then better than the one before." He turned her to face him, his gray eyes warm with love. "I love you, Cora Nash. I loved you then, I love you now, and I'll love you until the day I die." "I love you too," she whispered. "More than I ever thought it was possible to love someone." They kissed, there on the porch of their new home, with their children playing in the yard below and the mountains rising behind them. It was a perfect moment, the kind that Cora wanted to hold on to forever. The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. James grew into a strong young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did. Emma was bright and curious, always asking questions and reading every book she could get her hands on. Thomas was the wild one, always getting into mischief, but with a good heart that reminded Cora of Lucas. In 1895, when Cora was 42 and Lucas was 46, they celebrated their 19th wedding anniversary. The children were older now. James was 18 and already working the ranch alongside his father. Emma was 16 and helping Cora with the household and the younger children. And Thomas was 13 and in school in Independence. They'd also welcomed 2 more children over the years, twin girls named Sarah and Grace, who were now 7 years old and keeping everyone on their toes. They had a party that day, with neighbors and friends coming from all over to celebrate. There was food and music and dancing, and as Cora danced with Lucas under the stars, she thought about how blessed she was. She'd found her home, her family, her purpose. She'd found love in the arms of a cowboy who'd sheltered her from a storm and then given her the world. "Thank you," she said to him as they swayed to the music. "For what? For everything. For taking me in that night, for standing beside me, for giving me this life, for loving me. Cora, you don't have to thank me for loving you. It's the easiest thing I've ever done." He smiled at her, that same smile that had captured her heart all those years ago. "You're my life. You and these children and this ranch. Everything I am, everything I have, is because you chose to stay with me." "I'll choose you every day for the rest of my life," Cora said. "Good. Because I'm not letting you go." They danced until late into the night, surrounded by the people they loved, in the home they'd built together. And when the party finally ended and they went to bed, wrapped in each other's arms, both of them were smiling. The new century came, bringing changes to the world around them. The Wild West was becoming less wild, more settled. Railroads crisscrossed the land, towns grew into cities, and the old ways were fading. But on the Nash ranch, life continued much as it always had. They worked the land, raised their children, and built a legacy. James married a local girl named Margaret in 1901, and they built a house on the far corner of the Nash property. A year later, they gave Cora and Lucas their first grandchild, a boy named Lucas James Nash. Cora cried when she held him, overwhelmed by the beauty of it all, the continuity of family and love. Emma went away to school in Denver, determined to become a teacher. She wrote letters home every week, full of her adventures and her dreams, and Cora read them aloud to Lucas in the evenings, both of them proud beyond words of their bright, ambitious daughter. Thomas took over more of the ranch work as Lucas got older, and he proved to have a natural talent for it. The twins, Sarah and Grace, were growing into beautiful young women, both of them helping with the household and beginning to attract the attention of local boys. In 1905, on a warm summer evening, Cora and Lucas sat on their porch as they'd done countless times before. They were older now, their hair gray, their faces lined with years of work and weather, but they were still together, still in love, still grateful for every day they had. "You ever regret it?" Cora asked. "Taking me in that night?" "Your life would have been simpler if you just let me keep going." "Simpler, maybe," Lucas said, "but infinitely less rich. You gave me everything, Cora. You gave me a reason to build something, to dream, to hope. You gave me a family. I wouldn't trade a single moment of our life together for all the simplicity in the world. Even the hard times, especially the hard times, they made us stronger, made us appreciate the good times even more." He took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. "I meant what I said that first night, Cora. I wanted you to be mine, and you are. You'll always be mine, just as I'll always be yours." "Always," Cora agreed, leaning her head on his shoulder. They sat there as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant colors, and watched their grandchildren play in the yard. James and Margaret's family had grown to 3 children now, and they were all visiting for the evening. The sound of children's laughter filled the air, mingling with the sounds of the ranch horses nickering, cattle lowing in the distance, the wind rustling through the trees. It was everything Cora had ever wanted. More than she'd ever dared to hope for on that desperate night when she'd stumbled through a snowstorm, half frozen and terrified. She'd come to Lucas's door seeking shelter from a storm, and he'd given her a lifetime of love. "I owe you everything," she said softly. "No," Lucas replied, just as he had all those years ago. "You owe me nothing. You just had to be mine, and you are." "I am," Cora agreed and kissed him as the sun set on another perfect day in the life they'd built together. Years continued to roll by, each one a gift. They watched their children grow and have children of their own. Emma returned from Denver with a teaching certificate and a husband, a kind man named William who was a lawyer. She opened a school in Independence, educating a generation of children and making her parents proud. Thomas married in 1910, wedding a rancher's daughter named Catherine, and they took over the day-to-day running of the ranch as Lucas finally began to slow down. Sarah became a nurse, working at the new hospital in Independence, while Grace surprised everyone by becoming a journalist, writing for newspapers in Denver and sometimes even as far away as San Francisco. By 1915, Cora and Lucas had 10 grandchildren with more on the way. Their house was always full of noise and laughter, of family gatherings and celebrations. They'd built something that would last, a legacy of love and hard work that would continue long after they were gone. One evening in the spring of 1918, as they celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary, surrounded by children and grandchildren and even a few great-grandchildren, Cora looked around the crowded house and felt her heart swell with joy. This was what she'd fought for, what she'd survived for. This family, this love, this home. Lucas stood and raised his glass. "I want to make a toast," he said, his voice still strong despite his years. "To my wife, Cora. 40 years ago, she came into my life during a snowstorm, and she's been the light that guides me ever since. She's given me more happiness than any man deserves, and I thank God every day that she chose to stay with me." To Cora. Everyone chorused, raising their glasses. Cora wiped tears from her eyes, overwhelmed by the love in the room. "And to Lucas," she said, standing beside him. "The man who saved me, who loved me, who gave me everything. My husband, my partner, my best friend. I love you more today than I did 40 years ago, and I'll love you until my last breath." They kissed, and the room erupted in cheers and applause. Their grandchildren made faces at the display of affection, but their children smiled, knowing the depth of love that existed between their parents. The party went on late into the night, and when it finally ended and everyone had gone home or gone to bed, Cora and Lucas sat together on their porch, wrapped in blankets against the spring chill. 40 years, Lucas mused. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that you knocked on my cabin door. Other times it feels like we've been together forever. Both are true, Cora said. It's been a lifetime and it's been a moment. Time is strange like that when you're happy. Are you happy, Cora? Truly? Happier than I ever imagined I could be. You gave me the world, Lucas Nash. No, he said, pulling her closer. We gave it to each other. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. In the distance, a coyote howled, and from the barn came the soft sounds of horses settling for the night. It was peaceful, perfect, a moment of pure contentment. You remember what you said to me? Cora asked. When I said I owed you, I said just be mine. Best answer you could have given. It changed my life. It changed both our lives, Lucas said, and I'd do it all again in a heartbeat." So would I. They went to bed that night as they had for 40 years, wrapped in each other's arms, secure in the knowledge that they were loved. And if their bodies were older now, if their movements were slower and their strength less than it once was, their love was as strong as ever, perhaps even stronger for having weathered the storms of life together. Lucas lived to see the birth of his 15th grandchild in 1920 and his third great-grandchild. He worked the ranch until the very end, refusing to fully retire even when Thomas begged him to take it easy. "I'll rest when I'm dead," he'd say with a smile, and continue with whatever task he'd set himself to. He passed away peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1922, with Cora beside him as she'd been for 44 years. He was 73 years old and had lived a full, rich life. His last words to Cora were, "I love you. Always have, always will." Cora grieved deeply for the loss of her husband, her partner, her love, but she was sustained by her family, by the legacy they'd built together, and by the knowledge that she'd been blessed beyond measure. She'd had 44 years with a man who loved her completely, who'd given her everything, and who'd never once made her regret her choice to stay with him. She lived on in the house they'd built together, surrounded by children and grandchildren who made sure she was never alone. She told them stories of their grandfather, of the man he'd been and the love they'd shared. She told them about the snowstorm, about knocking on a cabin door and finding salvation in the arms of a cowboy who asked for nothing but her heart. Emma moved back to the ranch to care for her mother, and they spent many evenings sitting together, talking about life and love and loss. "He was a good man," Emma said one night, "the best father anyone could ask for." "He was the best of men," Cora agreed. "And I was lucky beyond measure to have him in my life." "You were lucky to have each other," Emma corrected. "You made each other better. You built something beautiful together." "We did," Cora said with a smile. "We really did." Cora lived to be 80 years old, passing away peacefully in 1923, just a year after Lucas. She died in her sleep in the house they'd built, in the bed they'd shared for so many years. Her children and grandchildren mourned her deeply, but they also celebrated a life well lived, a love well shared. They buried her next to Lucas on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a stand of pines that whispered in the wind. On her tombstone, they inscribed the words that had started it all. "She said, I owe you." He replied, "Just be mine." And though Cora and Lucas were gone, their love lived on in the family they'd created, in the ranch they'd built, in the lives they'd touched. Their great-grandchildren grew up hearing stories of the snowstorm, and the cowboy and the woman who'd found each other against all odds. It became family legend, a love story passed down through generations, inspiring them to believe in the power of kindness, of courage, of choosing love even when it seems impossible. The Nash Ranch continued to thrive, passing from Thomas to his children and then to their children. And always, on winter evenings when the snow fell thick and the wind howled, someone would tell the story of how it all began. Of a desperate woman running through a blizzard, of a cowboy who opened his door without hesitation, and of a love that lasted a lifetime and beyond. It was a story of survival and courage, of trust and devotion. But most of all, it was a story of love, simple, honest, true love that had stood the test of time and built something that would last forever. And in a world that was changing rapidly, becoming more modern and less wild, it was a reminder that some things never change. The need for kindness, the power of love, and the beauty of two people choosing each other every single day for the rest of their lives. The end.